It's time now to take a spin with Headline Roulette. These are the week's most compelling, random, and interesting headlines. We look high and low to bring the country's top minds to guide us through the chaos. Today's headline dealer is post-millennial and human events editor-in-chief, Libby Emmons. Libby, are you ready?
I'm all set, Chanel.
All right, let's roll. Headline number one, leftists and labor used to fight the power. Now they want to prop it up. That's a pretty good take.
Yeah, this is a column that I wrote for Human Events this week, and it was about the hands-off protests that we saw across the country, and I think something like 1,000 locations last Saturday, where a bunch of people who are really mad at Donald Trump, although they're not entirely sure why, went out into the streets to say so. And they had signs that said hands off, things like our research, or hands off our government jobs, hands off our Social Security, even though no one's touching that, and all kinds of other slogans that they came up with. And these are labor leaders. And what really struck me about these labor leaders is they were primarily leaders of government workers' unions. So these are leaders who are getting paid six-figure salaries that come from dues-paying government workers. And they're getting upset because the government is trimming waste and trimming, costs in large part by cutting workers, which of course anyone who runs a company will tell you payroll is the biggest cost of any company. So what they were saying is, we want more government workers on the taxpayer dime so that we can continue running our unions. But a union that is comprised entirely of people who don't have to compete on an open marketplace in an industry that is not competing on an open marketplace seems entirely disingenuous to me, because the labor movement in this country was about securing worker rights against corporate greed, which is something that, is now a hallmark of American work. We have a 40-hour work week. We have fair wages. We have good benefit programs. You even have, one of the older labor leaders from times past, Cesar Chavez, who was out there organizing migrant workers picking strawberries, was very opposed to illegal immigration, right? Because this was undercutting wages. Right. The current left is not opposed to illegal immigration. They don't care if the wages of working Americans get undercut, and they're trying to funnel workers into government unions instead, which are cushy positions for the most part. Sure, you have a lot of people who work for a living, traffic, cops or garbage men or things like this. But that's not who these people were talking about standing on stage in DC. That's not what they were talking about at all.
No. And I remember looking into this recently. As of November 2024, the American Federation for Government Employees, this is their largest government, union, they unsurprisingly donate 97% to Democrat causes, and they have the largest member body of any government union out there. So when you look at numbers like that, it's not surprising to say, well, a vast majority of these people too are politically, fundamentally against capitalism, against Republicans, and against America First, and lots of irony to spread around. Great column. Thank you for publishing
Thank you
that.
so much.
Headline number two. New York City woman who sucker punched pro-life activists during a street interview has been arrested. We have a snippet of that interaction. Roll clip.
So you went from saying that my outfit was really cute to saying I'm an effing idiot. That's so mean.
But I think that your point of view is very obstructed, and I think that you just don't understand the magnitude of having a child.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who admitted they would be okay with killing babies in foster care and killing children that have been abused.
That's not the point. What I'm saying.
That's really.
I'm still shocked, taken aback every time I see this clip, and I've seen this clip several times, Libby. She's been arrested now. What do you think?
You had Savannah Craven-Anteo out there speaking to people in Harlem about abortion and all of these other things. And to see this woman just haul off and sock her was pretty shocking. What I think this speaks to is a real lack of ability for people to just have discourse and to talk about things in any kind of polite or reasonable way. When you have the initial reaction after a disagreement is to just haul off and punch somebody. And this likely from the party of people, you know, we're going to assume that she's a Democrat or at least a leftist side of things. And to look at that and say, this is the party that says, you know, words are violence. Well, is this violence, guys? What do you think of that? And she's now been arrested. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
They're showing that their inability to use words is resulting in violence. And I think that's another broader trend we have in society, right? You've raised an entire, I guess, several generations at this point who have been trained to live off of very short clips, short attention spans. We're not trained linguistically like we used to be anymore, and we're certainly not trained in logical thinking, at least as far as the NEA has been concerned. They've been too worried about teaching about the different genders that may exist out there. So this is such a tragic testament, I guess, to the state of leftists, but especially young people who have lost the ability to actually argue in a civil way, and so they resort to physicality, which is extremely toddler-style behavior.
Yeah, it really is. And the assailant said that she had been provoked and that Savannah had been antagonistic. And sure, you know, I mean, that's part of the job when you're a street reporter. There's a lot of that, you know, you have these intensive conversations, but to not know how to regulate your own emotions to the point where you're just going to hit someone because you disagree with them, that's completely out of control. And as you were mentioning with the NEA and the kinds of curriculum that has been pushed across the United States and into schools, we have seen for the past few decades a situation where disagreement is not tolerated, right? You've had conservatives for years basically biting their tongue and not saying anything. So these people are out there and they don't even know that disagreement is possible. They don't even know that anybody has an alternative view.
Yeah, they don't know what to do when they're faced with disagreement. So, oof.
Yeah.
Glad somebody's taking notice in a proper way. Headline number 3. China announces restrictions of imports of U.S. films after Trump tariffs. Here's President Trump reacting to this headline.
China retaliated today by reducing the number of American films that can be shown there. What's your reaction to them now targeting cultural exports from the United States?
I think I've heard of worse things.
So this is pretty interesting. China only allowed in previously, I think, 34 films a year. They also required a fair amount of censorship on films, some films before they would release them. I think it was Top Gun Maverick had to get rid of a patch that was a Taiwanese flag, and China made them remove that. The film then later put it back in. Critics of Trump over this are saying that this is going to inhibit Hollywood from making expensive movies because the Hollywood gets in, I think, something like $5 billion a year from Chinese audiences. And this is going to hinder their ability to, you know, go all out with something like Avengers Endgame or something along those lines. From my perspective, someone who likes movies, someone who's into culture, I think Hollywood could really do with a shakeup. They're not doing great with that extra $5 billion or whatever it is. They're not making films that anybody really wants to see anyway. So perhaps if they have to tighten their belts a little bit, maybe if they can stop thinking about the Chinese censors before they make their films, we'll all be a little bit better off.
No kidding. 34 a year. I didn't know that. That's
yeah.
I mean, yeah, what are we going to do without our communist audience, right?
Oh, no.
Libby Emmons. Oh, no. Libby Emmons, a pleasure. Thank you for playing this round of Headline Roulette.
Thanks so much, Chanel.
It's all the time we have. Remember to download the OAN Live app on your TV and your favorite streaming devices. You can catch any Fine Point episodes you may have missed right there in the app with our video on demand feature. Spread the word. I leave you with this. Laughter is the closest distance between two people. Good night, Godspeed, have a great weekend.